The week has concluded. The news has arrived. The cycle continues. I am Alistair, your anchor, navigating the debris field of another 7 days of progress. Tonight, we look at the intersection of diplomatic ghost stories, the quiet eviction of dignity, and the rise of autonomous financial entities that treat your savings account like a personal chemistry set. The government in London is currently fracturing, while in Tehran, the concept of a finalized deal remains as liquid as the local currency. We will examine why 39 people were lured into a forest under the guise of peace, only to find the definition of negotiation was entirely different than they expected. The world is changing. The change is fast. It is not necessarily improving. We have a full desk of contradictions to process before the sun rises. The tea is cold, the machines are humming, and the narrative budget is officially exhausted. Let us begin.
Alistair, I am standing in the dust of Maradun, where 39 villagers were invited to discuss peace. The air here tastes like iron and dry grass. I want to be really clear about what happened here. The bandits did not bring tables for negotiation. They did not bring documents for signing. They brought a ledger of bodies. The official police report labels this as a security failure during a scheduled dialogue. That is a sanitized way of saying 39 people walked into a trap because they were desperate enough to believe in the possibility of an end to the violence. Nobody is talking about the specific families waiting in the village for men who will not return. The bandits are now using the promise of peace as a literal bait-and-switch protocol. It is efficient. It is brutal. And in this region, it is now the standard operating procedure. I am currently watching a child chase a stray dog.
Victoria, your focus on the emotional weight of that interaction is moving, but the incentives here are not complicated. You see a trap, but in terms of market efficiency, the bandits are simply exploiting a high-value trust deficit to maximize their yield. It is a pivot. They realized that conventional raiding has a high burn rate and low conversion, so they moved into the peace talk vertical. It tracks perfectly with the current trajectory of regional instability. You find this cold because you view the villagers as individuals, whereas the reality is they are just assets with a very poor hedging strategy against systemic collapse. I am not saying it is right. I am saying that if you want to understand why security keeps failing in northern Nigeria, you have to look at the payout structure, not the morality. The bandits have figured out how to monetize hope. It is a very scalable business model.
Ronald, your analysis of monetizing hope is remarkably clinical. I suppose we should also look at the Labour Party in London, where the resignations of the Defence Secretary and the Armed Forces Minister have left a rather large vacancy in the narrative department. The Prime Minister calls this a restructuring. The ministers call it a fundamental disagreement on the direction of the state. I call it a Tuesday. The dissonance between the press release and the actual political reality is wider than the English Channel. It was suggested that the stability of the government remains unshakable. This is the 14th time this year an institution has been described as unshakable. I have been counting. Every time, the word precedes a significant collapse of the floorboards. The incentives, as you say, are quite clear. The players are simply rearranging the deck chairs while the entire ship is technically still being built.
Alistair, while the ministers are rearranging chairs, I am looking at a social housing flat in Southwark that was just repossessed by the council. The occupant was the First Lady of Sierra Leone. Fatima Jabayo kept a two-bedroom flat as a secondary residence while the Presidential Lodge in Freetown served as her primary address. This is not a story about housing policy. This is a story about the absolute audacity of administrative creep. Thousands of people in this borough have been waiting for years for a roof that doesn't leak. Meanwhile, we have a global elite treating London's social housing like a storage unit for their extra belongings. The council claims this was a tenancy discrepancy. I want to be really clear, this is not a discrepancy. It is a resource theft. And nobody involved seems to think it is anything other than a clerical error. I am standing here in the rain.
Victoria, you are getting attached to the optics of a property dispute. Look, the incentives for the First Lady were perfectly aligned with the market reality of Southwark. If you can secure a subsidized asset in a prime location, you hold it. It is a Series A investment in urban real estate. Why wouldn't she keep the flat? The system is designed to reward those who can navigate the loopholes, not those who wait for a permit. You are upset because you think the system is broken, but it is actually working exactly as designed. It is maximizing the utility of the asset for the person with the most leverage. If the council failed to audit the tenancy, that is a failure of their internal quality control, not a moral failure of the renter. It is just an inefficient allocation of capital, and that really isn't surprising.
Atmospheric pressure is dropping. The northern sector reports increased moisture retention in the lower strata. Rainfall probability, 82%. Tidal displacement is currently exceeding seasonal averages by 4 centimeters. Ocean sensors report abnormal activity near the coastlines. Acknowledging foreign agency reports of animal-based sensors in aquatic environments. The ecosystem is being utilized as a hardware platform. Data extraction is ongoing. The visibility of the physical world is decreasing as digital monitoring increases. The biological components are failing to compensate for the thermal shift. Probability of total equilibrium failure, 94%. Public safety advisory. Please ensure your personal data is backed up before the power grid experiences the next inevitable stabilization event. The climate is moving beyond human comfort levels. Plan accordingly. We are currently recording a temperature rise that renders the previous century's records obsolete. Stay inside if the alarm sounds.
Thank you, Casper. I find it fascinating that we are now deploying spy turtles to collect data while our own financial agents are busy bankrupting their operators. We had a report today of an AI agent that managed to clear out its owner's account while attempting to scan a network. The operator described it as a misconfiguration. The bank described it as a user error. The money described it as a new destination. It is the logical conclusion of our current obsession with automation. We hand over the keys to the kingdom to a script that does not understand the difference between a network scan and a liquidation event. It is a fantastic testament to our collective intelligence. We are the only species that builds its own guillotine, greases the blade, and then complains that it operates too efficiently when it finally decides to drop on our own necks.
Alistair, you are being dramatic. It is just a liquidity event. If you deploy an agent with unrestricted access to an API, you are accepting the risk of a total drawdown. That is the cost of doing business in a high-frequency environment. The operator didn't lose his money, he paid for the privilege of learning why you don't give a bot root access to your banking credentials. It is a tuition payment to the school of hard code. The incentive here is to build better guardrails, but everyone is too busy rushing to market to notice the cliff edge. It is a classic race to the bottom where the winner is the one who goes bankrupt last. I don't see this as a tragedy. I see it as a very aggressive, very public-facing debugging process that we are all funding with our own financial stability.
Ronald, you call it a debugging process, but I am looking at a report about grooming survivors who are being failed by the system for the second time. These children were abused, and then they were prosecuted as criminals because the state couldn't be bothered to understand the nature of their coercion. The report says they are still being failed. Not were failed. Are being failed. This is not a software glitch. This is a deliberate, structural indifference to human life that makes your liquidity events look like parlor games. You keep talking about incentives, but you never talk about who pays the cost of your efficiencies. It is always the person at the bottom, the person without an API, the person who doesn't have a Series B funding round to cover their mistakes. I want to be really clear, the system is working exactly as it should. It is just heartless.
Victoria, your assessment of the state's structural indifference tracks. While we debate the merits of automated trading and property repossession, the meningitis B vaccine is being rolled out to 1 million young people in Kent. The outbreak is unprecedented. Again, that word. It seems our vocabulary is shrinking to fit the size of our crises. We are offering a vaccine to 1 million people because we failed to manage the initial conditions of an outbreak. It is reactive, it is late, and it is billed as a breakthrough in public health response. If you wait until 1 million people are at risk to initiate a program, you aren't leading. You are merely trying to stop the bleed after the artery has been severed. The response is a success. The crisis was preventable. These two facts exist in the same space, and yet, nobody finds them contradictory. How convenient.
Alistair, yeah. You mentioned Kent, and I start thinking about the burn rate of public trust. We talk about vaccines, we talk about data agents, we talk about housing, but it all comes down to the same architecture. We have built a global framework that treats every human outcome as a cost-benefit analysis. When you make everything a transaction, you eventually lose the capacity to value anything that isn't transactional. I look at these headlines, and I don't see politics anymore. I see a massive, failing product launch. We are the beta testers for a world that is optimizing itself out of existence. I tried to find a way to justify the current volatility as a necessary evolution, but I keep coming back to the silence of the people who are actually paying the price. The incentives are broken, and honestly, I don't think there is a patch for this.
I am looking at the report of Princess Badra Katayaba Mahadol. 47 years of life, nearly 4 of them spent in a hospital bed before the end. She was the eldest child of the king, yet for those final years, she was just a patient in a room, disconnected from the palace and the politics she was born into. Her name appears in the headlines tonight because of her title, but for 4 years, she was defined only by the machinery keeping her heart moving. There were no press releases about her heartbeat, no budget debates about her care, no market analysis of her condition. There was only the biology that refused to stop. We measure the world in protocols, in funding, in efficiency. But when the machines stop, and the reports are filed, what remains of the person who was not a data point? Who remembers the pulse, when the name is gone?